Welcome to the Prof G Pod's Office Hours. This is the part of the show where we answer your questions about business, big tech, entrepreneurship, and whatever else is on your mind. Today, we'll answer your questions about Shein's design practices, qualities to look for when hiring, and how to pivot when you're a mid-career professional. So with that, first question.
Hey, Prof G. I am a big fan of yours, writing in from the Mojave Desert. I know you recently defended Shein because of how its low prices enable young people to buy apparel. Leaving aside the many environmental concerns of fast fashion, are you at all concerned about the company's design practices? There's a lot of independent creators that are starting to call out Shein for copycatting its designs, like Cassie Ho at Blogilates and Popflex Active. Obviously, knockoffs are nothing new, but I'm kind of curious what you think about a $32 billion company stealing creative ideas and IP from other companies. Is this simply capitalism at work? Do we need an IP reckoning? Does original creation hold no value in today's world? And that's a bummer if true.
So absolutely, what Shein is doing is finding other impressive designers that have gotten traction in the retail market and copying them, copycatting them, whatever you want to call it. So now do Pottery Barn, Restoration Hardware, Old Navy, and essentially every other fashion company. And I remember being in board meetings, especially retailers, and they were very careful to say that it was inspired by. And almost every major selling product at a high-end or, not even a high-end, a mid-brand or mid-tier apparel, fashion, furniture company, you're going to find that the design was inspired by an artisan who, at a much higher price point, is doing something really incredibly creative. This has been an enormous source of frustration and debate across the artisan community for the last 30 or 40 years. And the reality is, correctly or incorrectly, it is very hard to impose that sort of IP protection around something. And to a certain extent, I mean, I live in Soho, and if you walk down Canal, there's just no controlling the knockoffs. I can go 50 feet and get a Chanel bag, a Rolex watch, and an Hermes bag that actually doesn't look, it's actually pretty decent quality, at least from kind of a foot away, if you will. And to a certain extent, a certain amount of IP theft, whether it's people borrowing passwords from Netflix or a certain amount of people ripping off and producing Chanel bags, they're not dumb. They kind of know what's going on. And a certain amount of leakage, if you will, is actually good marketing for them. Now, having said that, should IP protection be increased? I think you could argue that the final frontier of that, or the next frontier, is AI, and that is a lot of people have found that, or lawyers have found that AI or ChatGPT was producing articles that had lifted line for line, word for word articles from other major publications without compensating them for that. So am I worried about it? I don't think this is a new problem. I'm not saying it's wrong or right, but it's been going on across all sorts of, apparel and fashion and furniture companies. And this is kind of the ecosystem and how it works. Now, at some point, are the designs absolutely so incredibly close that you probably have some sort of case? Yes, but it's very hard to enforce. Birkenstock pulled all of their products off of Amazon because they said that the IP theft was just so extraordinary and they didn't like the way they were treating their brand in terms of pricing and kind of using sort of mob policy techniques to enforce that they couldn't discount their products anywhere else unless at the lowest price was on Amazon. In some long-winded way of saying the ecosystem builds in a certain amount of IP theft, and I don't think Shein is doing anything that everyone from Pottery Barn and Old Navy and Zara haven't been doing for decades now. Having said that, I think AI brings on a new set of dangers that we're probably going to have to be more thoughtful around. So is there additional IP protection needed? I don't know is the honest answer. I appreciate the question. Question number 2.
Hey Scott, this is Bryant from Salt Lake City. I work in law enforcement and my department recently underwent a round of promotional testing for sergeant. My question for you is 1, what qualities do you look for in people that wish to promote? And 2, how would you test for those qualities if any such test even exists?
Oh, hey, Brian from Salt Lake City, and thanks for your service and what you do. I have no idea how you would distill leadership qualities into a test, and unless it's sort of a rote thing where you have to have a certain baseline level of knowledge. But I would argue a test is not going to be a great means of figuring out who to promote. I think it might be a baseline that you have to have a certain level of knowledge around key issues. But I don't think you use that as quote unquote the fulcrum or the decider for who to promote. In terms of wanting to get promoted, I think there's just a few basics if you see yourself as someone you want to be tapped as a leader and get promoted faster than your peers. One is you have to demonstrate excellence. And that is you just have to be very good at what you do and reflect a real interest and passion for law enforcement. Two, and it sounds real basic, show up. And that is, 10 minutes earlier than anybody else, leave 10 minutes later. Be seen and get a reputation as the person that speaks well, that talks well of people behind their back. Listen, try and really promote other people's interests. The key to being successful, I think, is to develop allies along the way. And that is people will find out. I think it's just a safe assumption that everyone will hear eventually everything you say about them. So it's one thing to provide feedback, constructive feedback to people in a professional situation, but for the most part, you want to talk up your colleagues, you want to be there for them, and you finally want to act like an owner. And it's easy in a private setting or a private company to act like an owner. I can just tell when people are clearly acting like shareholders. The reason why in a private company you give, or I've given shares to everybody in the company, is you want them thinking about what's best for the business 24/7 because it directly motivates them because they see their compensation and well-being and ability to take care of their family directly tied to the well-being of the company. They start acting like owners. So how do you act like an owner? You represent the police force, you represent your specific civic domain, and you make a real effort to know that you're a spokesperson for not only our society, but that local municipality, that department, and you go out of the way to just try and enhance the brand, if you will, or the value of that department and that force. You speak well of people behind their back. You go out of your way to try and help others. You demonstrate excellence. You're the guy that understands the exact code of the law, understands how to handle difficult situation, studies up on this stuff, takes it very seriously, shows a passion for law enforcement. I think a lot of it comes down to being in the right place in the right time. And also, it sounds like you're an ambitious young man. Recognize that one of the virtues of getting ahead is patience. A lot of the most successful people in history, I would argue probably all of them at some point, they get passed over. They don't get promoted as quickly as they'd like. And the only thing I can guarantee you in any organization is injustice. And that occasionally is someone will get promoted over you sooner and faster. But typically the arc of promotions bends towards justice, and over the medium and the long term, good people get their due, if you will. But anyways, I just want to wrap up by saying appreciate your service, and the fact you're even asking these questions and thinking about it means you're probably tracking. So anyways, Bryant from Salt Lake City, well done. We have one quick break before our final question. Stay with us. Welcome back. Question number 3.
Hi, Scott. This is Kelly in New York. I am a mid-career entertainment professional, meaning I'm an out-of-work TV producer. And frankly, my career is basically over. I worked for 20 years and built up an amazing reputation and have tons of contacts and experience in my field. But guess what? Between the strikes, the Hollywood and news contraction, and business moving overseas, and TikTok, all my contacts are out of work, and my so-called skills are not necessarily translating to the real world. I'm sure there are many other listeners who have the same predicament. I'd love to know what your advice is for us not starting out professionals who've already sunk costs into the business.
Hi, Kelly from New York. I think so many people are in your position. You have an industry that went through, first off, the industry has too great an inflow of human capital. And that is, so many people want to be in that industry that the industry is able to pay people less than people of that talent in other industries because there's someone who will be an associate producer for almost no money. In addition, with every 17-year-old in the nation spending less and less time watching television, cable TV, and going to the movies and spending it all on TikTok, where there's 850 million creators who don't need health insurance or don't ask for it and are willing to make $10,000 or $12,000 a year to create what is probably pretty decent content in addition to their main hustle. There's just huge pressure. So anyways, I'm not telling you anything you don't know or haven't experienced. What to do? If have been successful, and it sounds like you have been, I would try and write down the series or the attributes that have made you successful. So if you're incredibly organized and know how to bring together a disparate group of people to create an environment and production and focus on details and logistics and create a mood and a vibe. Okay, Salesforce is probably going to spend a couple $100 million this year on events, on production. Anything live requires production talent. If you think about it, entertainment is essentially trying to build a story that captivates people's attention in this medium of film or television. And there's a lot of different, I think, industries where they're trying to capture people's attention across a different medium, whether it's a corporate gathering, whether it's an environment inside of a store, kind of store design or what have you. So start workshopping. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Every day, 3 or 4 emails to strangers, contacts, colleagues from your alma mater who are working in investor relations, comms, video production, content strategy, product management, program management. Reach out. Can we grab a coffee? And sort of get on it and just get back into the ecosystem, if you will. Also, Kelly, look into whether or not there are, I don't want to call them support groups because that sounds sort of weak, but groups of people to get together to talk about what they're going to do next, people in a similar situation. There was an organization, it's probably still around in New York, called Second Act. And it was for former finance professionals getting together to talk about their second act. And these were ballers. My close friend and someone who was on my board, who was one of the heads, I believe, or co-heads of private equity at Citigroup, was part of this group. And it was all these former CEOs and total ballers in the corporate world trying to figure out what to do next, who had either been laid off or quit their job. And it's really helpful to get in a room of people and just talk about stuff and be mutually supportive of each other and bounce ideas off of one another. So see if I'd be shocked if there aren't several groups like that have popped up in both New York and Los Angeles because of the extraordinary disruption taking place in the industry. But again, it's just so helpful to hear from other people. One, you recognize that it's happening everywhere. And two, again, it's hard to read the label from inside of the bottle. It's just nice having a group of people to brainstorm with. That's all for this episode. If you'd like to submit a question, please email a voice recording to officehours@profgmedia.com. Again, that's officehours@profgmedia.com.